So I really appreciate the opportunity to get these facts out. We've had some difficulty getting a hearing, but I appreciate it very, very much. And I want to congratulate our local council on doing such a fine job for us here in Georgia. This is just only the tip of the iceberg of all the good work that he's done. I'm going to present two witnesses to you who are in the nature of expert witnesses who have testified in cases like this at times in the past. One of them, Mr. Ramsland, is going to be on Zoom, and he's basically going to show that in 2016 you had only 199,356 mail-in votes. This time you have 1.3 million. 2016 you had a 6.4% rejection rate, and this time you had a 0.2% rejection rate. In other words, 0.2. So when you had 200,000 ballots, you had a rejection rate of 6.4%, and now when you have 1.3 million ballots, you have almost no rejection rate. 0.2% is almost statistically insignificant. That alone raises suspicion of fraud and has been held as such in election cases. And Biden won the mail-in vote by over 400,000. Mr. Ramsland will also go through the Dominion machine, the Hart machine, and how that compared to the other machines that you use throughout the state. And he will also show you some very, very, I guess he would describe it as indicia of fraud. You had 96,600 mail-in ballots that were voted, yet the county records show they were never received back. Be a little clearer. Altogether, you had 231,188 ballots with no return record at all. You were able to cancel 134,000 of those, but you kept 96,600 votes when there was no return record for them. What would that suggest? Phantom votes. There's no return record, yet it's counted. That pattern has appeared in other states that were involved in massive fraud. I might say that a good deal of what I see here is very similar to what happened at approximately that time in Pennsylvania. In Michigan at about 4 o'clock in the morning, people had been cleared out around 1 in the morning, been told there'd be no more counting. All the Republicans left. 2 remained behind accidentally, and a Dominion employee. And all of a sudden, they saw 2 big trucks come in the back. They thought they were food trucks, and they were very hungry, so they ran to the food trucks. Well, there wasn't food, there were ballots coming out. Thousands and thousands of ballots in paper bags, in garbage cans, in cardboard boxes, and then they were put on a table and they were counted for the next 3 hours. And there are 3 witnesses under oath to that, and they say that they were counted, and as they could listen, they never heard one time that there was a vote for Trump, and all the votes were for Biden. And they estimate somewhere between 50 and 100,000 votes entered at that time. There's similar evidence in Pennsylvania, and also something similar in Arizona at around this time. Second witness will be Colonel Phil Colson. Colonel Colson has had the opportunity to forensically examine the Dominion machine that actually began to cause the problem for Dominion. That was the machine that was found in Michigan's Antrim County that had recorded mistakenly 6,000 votes for Biden when the votes actually were cast for Trump. And he can give you an analysis of the problems with the Dominion machine, and also just a piece of advice. You've got a very big election coming up. I think you'd be very ill-advised to use that company or their machines. When you test their record over the last 12 to 15 years, I think you'll find they're one of the more insecure companies in this business. So let me first see if I can get Mr. Ramsland on the Zoom.
Mr. Ramsland will be via Zoom.
There he is.
There he is.
How are you, sir?
I'm
So
fine.
you are speaking to a committee of the Georgia legislature, and just tell us your name, please.
Russell Ramsland.
And you're a resident of Dallas, Texas, is that right?
I am. In fact, I'm in Dallas, Texas right now.
And you just give us your credentials, briefly. I know they're very long, so give us the best ones.
I run basically a security operation. We do cybersecurity as well as personal
As I
security.
know.
We have a number of ex-three-letter agency intel people that work for us in the cyber side. We have ex-military people that work for us in the cyber side. We have a fairly robust cyber capability in both protecting as well as trying to penetrate people's network to help them better protect.
And you hold an MBA from Harvard University, political science degree from Duke, and you've worked for NASA and for MIT. Is that correct?
Well, I have worked with NASA and with MIT. That is correct. Coming from West Texas, I don't always tell people about Harvard. They're a little worried about Harvard there.
Okay. So if we could go to page, just so that we can do this quickly, Mr. Ramsland, if we go to page 10 of your affidavit, where you describe the comparison of the Dominion and Hart machines in comparison to the other machines used in Georgia. What did you find when you did that comparison?
We were concerned because we had seen some audit logs in Dallas in 2018, so this really started for us long before this election. And we started actually with ES&S, but we eventually got into Dominion because we saw many of the same problems with Dominion in elections that we saw with ES&S. So the first thing we wanted to do was to see what the effect was of a Dominion machine compared to one other. And we looked at it, compared to a group of others, and we looked at it from 3 points of view. And the first thing we did is we tried to go through the 2017 census demographics. We got the 2020 vote count by county for the country. And then we also got the election assistance committee voting machine information, so we knew what each county had. And you would normally assume that once you do the correlation between turnout and voters and counties, et cetera, and how they voted in the previous election, you get a pretty good mathematical model as to what you should expect to see in a Biden versus Trump by county vote. And then we went and tested that, and sure enough, we found that the model was pretty darn accurate, other than a few extreme outliers that we do want to now go back and look at in more detail. But the point is, we could see on a percentage basis whether Biden, for instance, outperformed by a certain percentage or underperformed by a certain percentage, what you would expect in a county. And normally you would expect that overperformance and underperformance to about zero out. Well, in this case, what we noticed is when we went back and looked at it, instead of all voting equipment all over the country, and we simply segmented out Dominion, we found out that Biden outperformed what he should have by about 5% across the board. It was actually amazing. No other, we did not see that result in most other cases. So then we said, well, this is the election system. We've got to make sure that it's right. So we went back and we looked at it instead of percentage outperformance or underperformance. we looked at it by county. And when we did it by counties, we found an even more startling result. We found out that if Dominion counts your votes, Mr. Biden got about 78% of the wins. And if you use all other voting machines, then you only got about 46%. So we noticed right away, again, a second marker that with Dominion, he significantly outperformed any other voting system. And then we did what was called a chi-squared analysis, and I won't bore the committee with what that is. It's a regression of sorts, and it allows you to sort data into various boxes. And what we did is we wanted to find out, using this analysis, whether or not, again, Dominion outperformed the others. And it was very interesting because, once again, we came up with about the same number and we got about the same answer. And this analysis said that you get about a 5.5% bump compared to all other voting equipment as compared to Dominion compared to others. And when you apply that to the actual vote, then you find out that we're talking a fairly serious number of votes doing Dominion versus others. I think I jotted the number down here. Yeah, we found, using our first analysis, that about 123,000 votes in Georgia would have been entirely outside the realm of what you would have expected had another voting system been used. And if you use the chi-squared analysis, you got to about 136,000. So either way, it was a very significant number of votes. We did note that you had 199,356 mail-ins in 2016 with a 6.4% rejection rate. And then in 2020, you had 1,320,154 with a 0.2 rejection rate. So that got us looking then at the mail-in ballots. And we had already done an analysis in Dallas this voting cycle, and had found that after the county posted registered votes, and they do that by posting the voter record, so you can see a lot of data. You can see the name, the address, the date someone asked for a mail-in, the date they were mailed that mail-in, and the date it was returned. And what we found is that in early voting, over 57,000 votes were tampered with after the county had first recorded them as being voted. So we went and we did the same kind of look at in Georgia. And what we found was very interesting, because we found over 200,000 mail-in ballots that, when we looked at the voter record, had supposedly never been returned. And yet they were voted. Now, about half of those ultimately got purged, but about 96,000 of those were never marked returned, and yet they were voted. And we have seen that in other areas of the country, because it's very easy in the Dominion system to assign a person to a mail-in ballot inside the system itself.
Sir,
that's one possible explanation.
May I just interrupt with one question? To assign it that way would, of course, be fraudulent, wouldn't it?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have no idea. You just have a ballot in the adjudication file, for instance, and you decide to vote it, and you assign it to a voter.
How many times, approximately?
Well, there were about 96,000 of those that we found in, I think the exact, 96,600 was the exact number of mail-in ballots that were voted, but were never actually shown as received back by the county.
Well, I think, is there anything else you would like to point out? I think that's pretty complete.
I think that's pretty much got it.
So there's 96,600 votes that were counted, never received, and assigned somewhere. And these
Yes.
would have to be considered illegal votes, wouldn't they?
Right. And by the way, I would say this was not just mere oversight by one or two counties, because we saw this pretty much across the board. And so, this was an across the board problem. And we also saw a couple other interesting things. We noticed that sometimes the ballot was actually shown as being voted before it was received back. There was a receive back date, but it was voted before the county received it back.
How could that be possible?
Well, you'll have to explain that one to me too, because it's not supposed to be that way.
Okay.
We also saw a situation where ballots were voted the exact same day that they were mailed out. So they were mailed in, somehow they managed to make the round trip on the exact same day. We saw it happen just one day after, so that you mail it on a Tuesday and Wednesday afternoon in the mail you got the ballot back. We just saw a lot of these kinds of problems with the mail-in ballot, but it was the 96,000 that were never received back that really jumped out at us in a big way.
And what was the difference in the margin between President Trump and Joe Biden on mail-in votes?
I don't actually have that number handy, I'm sorry.
Well, if I told you 399,000, would that sound about right?
That's probably in the ballpark, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any questions, Mr. Ramsden? Okay, thank you, sir, for your participation today. I will.
The second person I'm going to ask to speak is Phil Coulson.
Yes, sir.
Phil, you're here. Are you not?
He's right behind you.
Right behind me, okay. Would you like to sit or stand?
Mr. Coulson,
Why don't you stand and I'll sit?
if you would tell us, give us your full name and tell us where you live and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let us know what you want us to hear.
My name is Phil Waldron. I live in Texas, close to Mr. Ramsden, out in Dripping Springs. So, my background is Army information operations, at the intersection of computer network operations, electronic warfare, psychological operations, deception, and OPSEC. And my point of view of looking at these systems is how to penetrate them, how to corrupt them, how to manipulate them to conduct strategic influence operations. And in my opinion, this is the American people are under a pretty significant information warfare campaign that's multifaceted. And we've looked at the Dominion system. We've looked at the history of these electronic voting companies, and they're all pretty well related. They're connected by a common DNA, which is their software code. So this all started back with Smartmatic. It was designed basically to keep Hugo Chavez in power in Venezuela. He invested, I believe, 28% of the funds to stand the company up. And I personally debriefed the son of a Cuban intelligence officer who firsthand knowledge two of Hugo Chavez's family members when Maduro was faced by a populist uprising after Hugo Chavez had died. Two of Hugo Chavez's family members said, "Don't worry, it's guaranteed. Our father invested the money into Smartmatic so that Maduro's going to win." So I guess to connect all the dots, Dominion Voting Equipment acquired a company called Sequoia Voting Systems, which was spun off of SGO Smartmatic. And they also acquired the Premier system, which came from the Diebold election company, which also used Smartmatic software. ES&S software, which Mr. Ramsden mentioned, has a license agreement with Smartmatic, and so does Dominion. They all feed information to Clarity Elections, which is owned by a company named called Scytl, SCYTL, which is headquartered in Madrid, Spain. They also have U.S. elections. Our team's recently uncovered, just doing basic investigative work on the dark web, but we have an affidavit to this effect that Smartmatic and Dominion do share a physical business address in Barbados at the same building, the same street address. So there are commonality in business links, licensing agreements.